Much of the world's commerce is transported by large ocean-going ships. Since World War II, the length, width, and depth of commercial shipping have steadily increased. Today's modern container ships are as long as aircraft carriers and require channels of 50 feet or deeper when fully loaded. These ships call at ports served by man-made navigation channels. The channels must be regularly dredged to provide reliable and safe passage for vessels and to maintain the economic viability of ports. Experience in the U.S. and from around the world shows dredging channels through coastal inlets can induce adjacent shorelines to erode. Such erosion occurs when dredging interrupts the natural movement of sand, known as littoral drift. However, erosion can be avoided if dredged sands are placed at locations that mimic natural littoral processes. One area in the U.S. where channel maintenance is causing severe shoreline erosion, habitat loss, and the disruption of a major barrier island system is Dauphin Island, Alabama.
Dauphin Island is a barrier island. It's actually Alabama's only barrier island. And barrier islands geologically have been around about 6,000 years, we think. When the storms come, the island is the big shock absorber. It takes the brunt of the waves. We've always had hurricanes, so our history is that Dauphin Island can take a beating. But our history in the last 7 decades is we've basically taken away our shock absorber. Dauphin Island has become, unfortunately, a poster child of a disrupted system.
The thing to remember, this is a living, working, breathing community. That there are people that live here, work here, have businesses here, their livelihood is here, they feed their children with the work of their hands. Dauphin Island has a sense of identity. We have our feet both firmly planted in the beauty of creation, and that's where we are. And there's a peace that is here as a result of that almost everyone I've spoken with feels that's why people are here.
Well, my name's Avery Bates. 5-generation commercial fisherman, and it's in my blood, I guess. During the Depression, food got real short in the farm area, so my family migrated down here, and we set up roots, and we've done it because of the availability of food, plenty of fresh water, and we love what we've done. Being able to feed yourself from the sea, it's a part of our life, it's our culture, it's our heritage down here.
We lived on the Mississippi coast when Katrina hit, and our home was flooded and destroyed, and at the time we were actually building this house that we're in on Dauphin Island as a second home, as a birdhouse, as we called it, because we wanted to come on weekends and see the birds. But when the home in Mississippi was destroyed, we moved over here, which at the time we thought it was going to be temporary, but we fell in love with the place and temporarily turned into permanent, and I can't imagine ever leaving Dauphin Island.
I am Representative David Sessions, born and raised coastal Alabama, farmed for a living. Decided to run for House seat and was elected to House District 105 in a special election in 2011. Love my community, love this island. It's a treasure for the entire state. That's why I ran, and it's a great area.
The culture of this island is rather unique in that if you go back to 1699 ship manifest and you read, you find that there are the Patronuses and the Colliers and the Sprinkles and other names are listed in the ship manifest. Well, my kids went to the Little Red Schoolhouse, and they're in school with the Patronuses and the Colliers and the Sprinkles, and there aren't that many places in the United States where you've got 7th and 8th generation people that came from the boat in 1699 and stayed. This is a pretty unique, special place.
The population of Dauphin Island is about 1,300 people. Now that's those people that live here year-round, but of course that population swells dramatically in the summer season. Tourism is our main economy. Ecotourism is really more so what it's all about. People like to come here to take part of the natural resources we have, whether it's birding, fishing, beaching, boating, swimming, all of those things that you would expect on an island community. There's a tremendous amount of history here, whether you go back to the Indian shell mounds, the Battle of Mobile Bay with historic Fort Gaines, and so all of those things, that's what's really a big part of the appeal that Dauphin Island offers.
The Mobile Bay watershed is special. It's a place you can swim and play and work and enjoy every single day of your life. But also, it's where we do our jobs. It's where we thrive. It's where we make our livelihoods. This place is unique, and not just for people. We've got turtles, we've got fish, we've got trees, you name it. We have so much alive and so much diversity.
I'm here because of the birds. I live here because of the birds on Dauphin Island. Pretty much all the species that come to North America, at least down to the eastern side of North America, come through Dauphin Island area. We have somewhere in the vicinity of 340 who could potentially come through this area on a yearly basis.
We've been blessed to have the natural resources that we have. 90% of our seafoods come from our bays and estuaries. And I think we do a good job at feeding our people from the sea for hundreds of years. And we've enjoyed shipping our seafoods all over the country and sometimes the world.
One of the reasons oystering is so successful here in the area just off of Mobile Bay is that there's a very delicate balance of estuary water, and oysters flourish in a very critical band of salinity. And that's just another example of how Dauphin Island maintains that delicate balance in the Mississippi Sound.
All of it's very interconnected. Your quality of life, your enjoyment of the waterways, and your economy. So as we think about new projects or new development projects, we have to think very carefully, what will it impact? What will it change? How many layers down will it go before we've lost something that we can't get back?
The Mobile Ship Channel has been in place for decades, and as the channels have to be, they generally have to do maintenance to clear sand and other material from the channel so that they maintain the depths. But unfortunately, the impacts are continually kind of chipping away at our barrier island.
The channel used to be 30, 35 feet when I was a boy, dragging the channels when we shrimp there with my papa. It is now about close to 50 feet. In places it's even more than that. That in turn causes the erosion problem, which has continuously got terrible over the years. 150 years ago you could throw a rock from Petty Boy, which is in Mississippi, to actually the end of Dauphin Island. Now it's not so because much of Dauphin Island is washed away.
Waves are always there. Sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're smaller. And sometimes they're breaking in from the left and driving sand to the right, and sometimes they're breaking from the right and driving sand to the left. But over the long term, most of the sand moves to the right as you stand on a beach in Alabama. In other words, it's moving from Florida to Mississippi. And that's the natural sand sharing system that is part of the barrier island. So when you get to a navigation channel or an inlet, that's an interruption of it. But Mother Nature 10,000 years ago, or at least 6,000 years ago, figured a way to get sand across that inlet. Typically, it was in shallow water, in shoals, which were very difficult for navigation. Most navigators hate inlets because that's where they can run aground on shoals. So the dredging makes it safe to get through there by making it deeper, making it straight. But now that we're dredging the ship channel, we've interrupted that natural bypassing system permanently. So there's been no natural feeding of the updrift end of Dauphin Island in the last 7 or 8 decades.
The ship channel runs north-south, and it keeps the sand from moving east-west that would normally occur through the littoral flow to bring sand to us. And so as the channel is maintained and the material gets dropped further out into the Gulf, we're losing that benefit that Mother Nature would deliver to us.
We're also talking about widening and deepening the ship channel. The good news in that is that they're doing a comprehensive study, an environmental impact statement that should outline not just what that particular dredging operation will do to Mobile Bay, but also what's happening across and throughout Mobile Bay. In concert with the community, we've all been asking for, really insisting that the study include what does erosion look like? What does sedimentation look like in Mobile Bay? What is the ship wake doing to us? What is the salt going to do to us when you're changing the salinity levels and you're changing the pathways that water flows? So we have to be really cautious and careful.
We're looking between 48 and 50 feet, currently 45, so we're looking at potentially up to 5 feet deeper with about a 100-foot widener for about a 3-mile stretch. The data collection and engineering models are complete. And our preliminary analysis indicates that there's little to no impact on the habitats. So that's very good news based on that analysis. What's next? For any impacts that we see, as you just described, like for the wake simulation, or if we see negative impacts, then we'll have to look to do mitigation and what that would mean. So right now we don't foresee any major impacts. And so we hope that shouldn't take very long, but we're not completely done, so we'll see what happens there. We'll finalize the proposed project dimensions.
I might have more questions than I was prepared for because I'm a little bit shocked, thrilled, worried that there are 0 impacts from deepening and widening the ship channel to this level of degree. I'm sorry, it's a lot deeper and a lot wider, and I don't think that, I think we all understand that this is the next step in our community and the next thing we need to do, but finding 0 impacts to anything of the 5 major things that we're concerned about is a little worrisome. I mean, if you'd said we're going to have this much impact, so we're going to have to mitigate this much, I'd have been like, okay, good, let's talk about mitigation. But 0 impacts is a little bit disarming.
Well, the studies that were done at the University of South Alabama 20, 30 years ago very clearly documented this dominant direction of sand transport along the coast, and the fact that the ship channel was interrupting and it was probably causing downdrift impacts. So that's very clear, and that's been validated by some USGS studies about 10 years ago.
In 2007, the U.S. Geological Survey completed a study of the erosion and decreasing size of the Alabama-Mississippi Barrier Islands. Dauphin Island is a member of the Barrier Island system. That study had several conclusions. First, erosion of Dauphin Island began to accelerate in 1957 and has continued to the present. Second, the rates of sea level rise and storm activity that can influence shoreline erosion have been consistent since 1957. Third, since 1957, the dimensions of the Mobile Harbor Ship Channel have been regularly increased, resulting in dramatic increases over time in the average annual volume of sands dredged from the channel. Fourth, increased channel dredging is a major factor that coincides with Dauphin Island's accelerated erosion.
The Corps of Engineers studies are mainly focused on justifying not doing what everybody else says should be done. And the science in some of those studies is really bad, and that shouldn't happen. We know how sand sharing systems work. We know that there are beneficial uses of this dredged material. And the beneficial use in this case is to put it back in the littoral system from which it just came.
People look at the money and they get excited about the money, and they look at the Port of Mobile, which is, one of the biggest ports in the United States and the most important ports, and obviously it's an economic engine here. But a lot of times the economics end up overshadowing and suffocating the environmental issues. And so that's, to me, the biggest issue with the dredging. I don't think anybody should be an opponent of economic development in the Port of Mobile. That's the lifeblood of the area. It creates jobs and a tremendous revenue. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do you take some of those dollars and also put it into preservation to make sure you don't slay the golden goose.
The ship channel is absolutely needed for our economy. There's lots of jobs, putting food on the table for people who live in this area related to that ship channel. And this issue is not attacking the ship channel, it's only attacking how we dispose of that sand that's dredged out of the southern couple miles of the ship channel. We can have great ship channels and great beaches. It's not an either or. We just need to spend a little bit more money and put the sand, the beach quality sand that we dredge, back in the beach system.
The place the sand is currently being deposited is called the Sand Island Beneficial Use Area, and it's quite ironic because it couldn't be less beneficial in that particular area. It's deep enough water, far enough south that it's removed permanently from the littoral drift that runs from east to west across the island. What we'd like to see is a real beneficial use area.
We currently dispose of material in what we call the Sand Island Beneficial Use Area. So that's the sand that we dredge from the channel. We put it in the Sand Island Beneficial Use Area. We've been placing material there since approximately 1999. What is transported out of this site is about half of the rate that we put it in there. So it's moving out at a lower rate than what we're putting in. So it's accumulating material out there right now. So that leaves us with two choices. We can either change our equipment methodology. We currently use a hopper dredge to dispose of that material in waters deeper than 20 feet essentially. Ideally 23 feet or deeper. Or we can change to a different type and keep and maintain this current box of sabua, just putting it in shallower parts of that area with an increased cost associated with it. Or we can follow the sediment transport pathway, which has been identified historically that I showed you in the last two slides, as well as the slide you see here, and expand that sabua area following the sediment transport along the shoal towards Pelican Island. So the recommended path forward that the agency is currently taking is to expand that area towards Pelican Island. That is actually going on independent of the study we're doing here, and that's to meet our future needs of our maintenance program.
It obviously will cost more money to put it up in the right place, in the either very shallow water inside of 15 feet in the right places, or directly on Dauphin Island. The ultimate beneficiaries are the people in the state of Alabama, and in particular the people in southern Alabama. So I don't really care where the money comes from to pay the incremental costs, because we're losing much more than that with the impacts of not bypassing sand.
They say that it is less expensive to do it that way, and they have a budget that they have to go by, but it would be hundreds of times that budget if we had to do a full replenishment project of Dauphin Island, because the infrastructure of the mainland is potentially damaged. These are two different agencies of a federal system or a state-based system, and I don't understand all of the details and ins and outs of those organizations, but I do understand that I'm a taxpayer, and I would rather see them spend an extra $2 million to put the sand in the right place versus have to spend in the billions of dollars replenishing something. I mean, if it's all coming from taxpayers, wouldn't you want to pay less to do it right the first time? If I suggested to my owners here as a manager of this association that we not do proactive maintenance and just then wait and spend something that's going to cost 100 times that amount, I wouldn't have my job for long.
Where other states protect their beaches and their barrier islands, Mississippi's had multi-millions of dollars put into their barrier islands. And what has Alabama done? We're the only ones that let something like a channel be dug with no proper restoration to our beaches. We sit here and watch it go away. We watch our seafoods go away. We watch our people go away.
The Gulf Coast states of Florida, Texas, and Mississippi have all passed laws and adopted regulations to ensure their coastal sand resources are preserved. And Louisiana has undertaken an aggressive program to restore its eroding shorelines. With only 54 miles of coastline, Alabama is the only Gulf Coast state that has not passed a law or implemented a program to conserve its limited beach quality sands. Dauphin Island is the lead island in a chain of 5 offshore barrier islands. The islands stretch westward 80 miles from the mouth of Mobile Bay across Mississippi before ending near Louisiana. The barrier island chain has existed for at least 6,000 years. The health of all 5 barrier islands depends upon the natural movement of sand from the east across the mouth of Mobile Bay. The stability and resilience of Mississippi's 4 islands depend upon sands coming from Dauphin Island. Beginning in the 1950s, maintenance dredging of the Mobile Harbor Channel has steadily starved Dauphin Island of sand. The effects of that sand loss have contributed to the erosion of Mississippi's islands.
This morning we're located in the Davis Bayou area of Gulf Islands National Seashore. It's our one mainland unit in Mississippi. Most of the National Seashore in Mississippi consists of the barrier islands, which range from 7 miles to 11 miles from the mainland. Gulf Islands National Seashore was established by Congress in 1971, and it happened actually in very short order. Most national parks can take a couple of decades or longer from initial thought to legislation, and it took little more than 5 years for Gulf Islands because of the support that there was from the citizens, both in Florida and in Mississippi, to preserve their barrier islands that they love so very much. So it's important that when we make adaptations and modifications and changes to our environment, that we do so in an informed way, understanding how the environment works so we can minimize the impacts that it has on the environment. It's to our own best interest, and when it comes to placement of dredge materials, in the long run, it's better to spend a little bit more money each dredge project to keep that sand in the system and keep the islands renourished. One of the best examples of impacting that movement of sand in the littoral zone is within the National Seashore in maintaining the Pascagoula shipping channel. Over the 100 years that they've been dredging the Pascagoula shipping channel, they ended up removing about 20 million cubic yards of sand. To give you some sense of how much sand that is, if you're familiar with the New Orleans Superdome, you could fill up that Superdome from floor to ceiling and fill every nook and cranny 4 times over with 20 million cubic yards of sand. The National Park Service is currently cooperating with the Army Corps of Engineers and some other agencies to restore that sand that was removed from the system. It's called the Mississippi Coastal Improvement Program, and that was the result really of Hurricane Katrina and the over $100 billion in damage it caused to the Gulf Coast. Ship Island in particular diminished significantly because of past dredging and then that storm surge. At that point, people began to, I think, have a greater appreciation and understanding of the role the barrier islands play.
In the case of Dauphin Island, since 1980, the Corps has dredged over 30 million cubic yards of sand from the Mobile Harbor Bar Channel. Around 22 million cubic yards, or 75% of that amount, were dumped in deep Gulf waters, permanently removing them from the nearshore littoral drift system. That massive loss of sands is contributing to the progressive erosion of the entire barrier island system.
Well, Dauphin Island's plan to save itself in the long term has 2 parts. Number 1, put sand on the beach right now being in geologic time frame, to make up the deficit from the last 7 or 8 decades of not bypassing sand. And step 2 is to fix the bypassing. So artificially bypass any sand dredged in the future up into shallow water so it migrates on shore. So we at least fix the problem. It's like going to the doctor. If we don't fix the fundamental underlying problem of fixing the bypassing, everything else is a Band-Aid. But we do know that if we could do both, we'll have a healthy barrier island for decades and centuries. So what's happened so far is Dauphin Island did half of step 1. Dauphin Island got a grant from essentially the governor's office. And a year and a half ago, we renourished the east end of Dauphin Island, the less expensive, less extensive part. And it's really where nobody lives. It's in front of the Dauphin Island Sea Lab and the bird sanctuary. So it was purely a habitat restoration design that has functioned well to date, and it will continue to function well. So that's the first time in Alabama history where we actually added sand to the beach system of Dauphin Island. We still need a much larger amount of sand on the west end to restore the deficit to where we were just 4 decades ago.
Unfortunately, time is not on our side. We've been talking about this for a long time, and it's do or die time. I mean, we've got to get something done. And the sad part is we have an opportunity here to do that. The opportunity exists, and yet we just don't seem to have the right will to do so. That's the part that's problematic for me.
You know, there was a lawsuit several years ago, and there are some kind of hard feelings on both sides of this issue. And I don't think that's the proper attitude or avenue to take on this. I'm trying to get into the middle of this thing and correct a problem. The House bill that I brought up a couple of times, about 3 years ago and then this past year, you know, if we could pass something like that to encourage the state, some of the state entities to realize the importance of keeping this barrier island healthy and in place, that everyone wins.
House Bill 422 was introduced into the Alabama State Legislature, but failed to be enacted into law. The bill is referred to as the Alabama Coastal Sand Conservation Act. It declares that if dredging interrupts the natural littoral drift of sand along Alabama's coastline, it is in the overall public interest to require the dredged sand to be deposited so as to replicate the natural littoral drift process. The bill describes the procedure to identify where sand dredged from coastal inlets should be deposited to prevent the erosion of adjacent shorelines.
I know I'll bring this legislation back next year because it's an important piece of our community. We can create problems with things that we do, but we also know that we can help solve problems. You know, there's no reason that we can't spend another $500,000, even if it's $1 million, every 18 months is when they dredge the outer bar channel, on average, 18 months. That's not a big ask. They're working on a study now to show the economic benefits of the island and those type things. When that study's complete, I think we'll have a really good shot of getting this, either this legislation passed or either they're going to start doing it the way it needs to be done on their own, because it'll show the economic viability of the oysters, the shrimp, all that stuff. We all need to be environmentalists in a way. I grew up in the agriculture business, and we weren't always the most friendly to the environment, and we learned from our mistakes. So with this economic driver, let's take a little bit of that money and let's place this sand where it would benefit keeping this island here and viable.
Unless we get some type of comprehensive restoration project on the Gulf side of the island, or get some type of a favorable change to the disposal practices as it relates to the dredging of the ship channel, it's pretty simple. The island is going to continue to degrade, and we're going to continue to lose a very important critical barrier island, the only one in Alabama, that is doing its best to provide the types of defense mechanisms that the upland areas need and the coastal environment needs to maintain itself.
The barrier islands are what block the heavy wake against a hurricane. They keep the salinity at bay so that you can have those oysters be healthy. You got a wave, it's coming from the bottom. It's coming up, and as soon as the energy is lost from it, it doesn't have the same impact on our property value, on our natural resources, but also on the sewage treatment facility that's behind that wetland area, which is going to get wiped out in a big storm. We've got to make sure we're protecting all of that critical infrastructure, and our barrier islands as well as our wetlands does a phenomenal job of doing that.
It's very critical that we continue to have the natural habitats that are left here on the island. When a bird is migrating north, barrier islands are the first thing they come to. You can imagine after a potentially 18 to 24-hour flight, they're exhausted. So when they get to the island, they put down to refuel to fly further to their nesting areas. Should the island totally erode, the first places they're going to reach are on the mainland. It would be detrimental, obviously, the further they have to go to reach a food source. When their energies are gone, they go.
A dependable living now is not in the cards for a lot of commercial fishermen. It's, in fact, our industry's depleted so much. The habitat we've lost has been tremendous. When you lose habitat, you lose your bottoms for fish to be raised on, your oyster reefs. Lack of barrier islands causes saltwater intrusion. That, in turn, causes more oyster drills to come in. One oyster drill can eat as many as 80 or 90 oysters a day. But the only thing that kills an oyster drill is extra fresh water, and you can't have fresh water if the Gulf is at your back door where it used to not be. We had a 4-day oyster season this year. The last day they worked, there was 4 oystermen out. We used to have over 400. And now just about every oyster that's opened in Alabama comes out of either Texas or Louisiana or Mississippi. Such a travesty to lose such a precious resource. And all these things that was handed down from our grandfathers, I can't pass it on. I cannot pass it on to anybody else if it's not here to pass on.
I look at this island and think, why would you not want to do everything you can to preserve this place? That's a mystery to me. All you have to do is open your eyes and look. Then all you have to do is open your ears. And really the only question left, as far as I can see, is are you going to take action? Are you going to be a difference maker, or are you just going to sit back on the sideline?
The important takeaway here is that it's not just about the island, and it's not just about a handful of residents. It's about the thousands of people that use the island each year, and the many, many thousands of people who live on the mainland that are protected by our barrier island. So really all we can ask is that we do the best job of stewardship that we can. The science exists to support the belief that where the sand is deposited makes a difference. And the technology exists to execute it. We just need the resources, the financial and political resources to make that happen.
Anger doesn't really get us anywhere. Frustration doesn't really get us anywhere. I think that we're all on the same side. The main thing is that we need to be unified in this. And so the more people that want to share with their congressman in a positive way what needs to happen regarding where this sand needs to land to protect Dauphin Island, the more people that get involved with that effort, I believe the more success that we will have and really make a difference in our community.